Hello, today is Friday, January 9th, and welcome to episode 543 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Jessica Jones, and I'm joined today by NSI Advisory Board member Les Munson and two of our favorite senior fellows, Morgan Vigna and Matthew Hyman. I'd like to say this is my first episode of the new year driving the host seat, so I'm feeling excited. It's a fun Friday. We've got a lot in the news. And what are we talking about today, guys? Greenland. Woohoo! Welcome to 2026. You must have had your head in the sand if you haven't been hearing about Greenland lately. This week, it's been in the news. It has become very clear that the President Trump and his administration would like to take over, and I put that in air quotes, however you may take that, take over the island, whether that's ownership, whether that's more control, whether that's just more American presence. They want Greenland. For those that don't remember, President Trump was also interested in Greenland in his first administration. It was in the news last year. You know, it's not just about military access, possession. It's, the administration frames it as a national security concern when it comes about Russia, China, missile defense, Arctic competition. It hits a whole lot of areas. Greenland, if you don't know, is a semi-autonomous territory of Denmark, one of our friends and allies, as well as a European friend. Since 1951, the U.S. has operated a Cold War-era defense agreement with Denmark, which already grants the U.S. a lot of military authority across Greenland. So there have been U.S. bases. There's, in fact, a U.S. presence now. The U.S. can deploy forces, controls, to some extent, air and maritime movement, and it can expand with some flexibility, expand or restrict its footprint on the island. So there's a lot of questions of why now, why the escalation, why the rhetoric. There have been some ideas floated. Perhaps Baron Trump could marry the Princess of Denmark and we could have a royal wedding. We could also, the U.S. could pay Greenlanders in an independence vote. They could become part of the U.S. Who doesn't want another state? Who knows? So there's a lot going on. Matthew, I'm going to turn first to you. Are well-dressed. If you guys can't see his office, he definitely wins best office out of the NSI Faultliners this morning. What's going on? What is the U.S. interest in when it comes to Greenland? Is it new? Is it historic? Can you explain it to us?
So it is historic. Going back to Secretary of State Seward after the Civil War, there's been a continuing interest by the U.S. in having rights or ownership of Greenland, and it pops up, from 1867 forward. There's many occasions where different administrations have either tried to buy it, acquire it. As you rightly said, the current state is we have a defense agreement that's been in place for over 70 years that gives us pretty broad-ranging rights to station troops in Greenland. And the strategic interest today is driven largely by what our adversaries are doing in the Arctic. So Russia has been very active in the Arctic. China has positioned itself as a near Arctic player. And both of those countries are interested in the Arctic for navigational purposes. They're interested in it for missile overflight purposes, and likely are also interested in it for strategic minerals and rare earth elements. And Greenland is geographically squarely right in the Arctic, and Greenland may have strategic minerals and elements, and it's an important spot. And so I think the administration's thought about the strategic importance is legitimate. It's hard to argue they're wrong on that score. The area where I think they've gone off the rails is their approach. I think if they had sat down with the Danes and the Greenlanders and said, we're really concerned, this is what we need, I think they would have received a much better reception than the approach of, we need to own it, it should be ours, and who cares about NATO? I mean, let's remember Denmark is a NATO member. Denmark has routinely sent troops into foreign theaters where the U.S. was fighting and was supportive of us as a NATO ally. And so I think we shouldn't throw that history out. But if we sort of remind ourselves that how does the Trump administration do things? They make maximalist demands. They say outrageous things, in particular the president, in this case the vice president as well. And then they often back off, as we are seeing with Colombia, where they were wanting to do all kinds of things there. And now Petro is going to visit the White House next week. So my hope is that these are a bunch of maximalist demands and crazy rhetoric, and maybe the Danes bring their equivalent of a Rolex watch to the White House and Trump settles down and they come up with an agreement. Because the one area where I think, especially Vance's criticism of the Danes saying, well, they haven't done enough to protect Greenland. Well, what has the U.S. done? I mean, the U.S. has 200 troops. They could have ratcheted up the troop presence. They could have pushed Denmark to say, you need to do more. And if Denmark had refused, that's a much different conversation than the one we're in right now, where it seems like the U.S. and in particular Trump and Vance are just saying wild things to get a reaction.
So, Morgan, I want you. Matthew brought up Europe and Denmark as a part of NATO. President Trump gave an interview to the New York Times, and they brought up Greenland and said this might be a decisive issue. It might come down to Greenland in NATO. What happens if there's military confrontation over the island? And he goes, "Yeah, that might be a choice." And he's not giving a lot of credit over here to NATO. What do you think are the ramifications of kind of the White House's approach right now when it comes to Greenland? Matthew's brought up, legitimate national security concerns when it comes to the island.
Yeah, President Trump, I think, is spot on to prioritize Greenland. I think his approach to it, as Matthew notes, is a little unorthodox. There are, of course, ways to pursue a closer relationship. The idea of a a compact of free association. We have that with a lot of PCIDs, country-specific island states like Palau, Micronesia, whatever. That is an option that was actually floated, early last year as a potential opportunity. Buying Greenland, I mean, whatever that looks like, there are ways to strengthen that relationship. I think it's important to note that Greenlanders also get a vote here. Right. It is within the Greenlander national defense strategy, or their equivalent of it, that they are going to pursue independence. They want to be an independent country. Think they have a lot of challenges to that. Les, we'll get to you. Wait your turn. With that said, I think the United States needs to actually, have those conversations, not just with Denmark, but also with Greenland in terms of like what they need, what kind of guarantees do they need, and what kind of economic support do they need in order to be successful. When it comes to Denmark, they really lost a really good opportunity to partner with Greenland, and given Greenland's strategic location. Denmark, had an opportunity to be a better partner to Greenland, and unfortunately, it hasn't met the moment. I will note, though, that a lot of European partners, our closest ones, primarily like the UK, France, Germany, Poland, have also been highly critical of the Trump administration. This has been ongoing during the Ukraine negotiations, which makes it a little awkward. But with that said, I think that the Trump administration, we have an opportunity here to pursue closer relations with Greenland based on all of the justifications that Matthew laid out. I think going about it, though, is going to be really tricky. Marco Rubio is going to be going to Denmark next week to meet with the government at their request. So I'll be sort of keeping an eye out for what comes from those talks.
I hope he has a smoother visit than Vance's visit last year. That was rough. Les, I'm going to end with you because I know you've got some hot takes when it comes to the Danes and when it comes to Greenland and that general part of the world. I will say Copenhagen had the most expensive burgers and Diet Coke I've ever had in the world. So I don't know if they've always been anti-American or if this is a new stint, but I'd like your take on what's going on.
All right. First of all, I agree with pretty much everything Hyman said. I agree with everything Vigna said, except this independence thing for Greenland. That's total baloney. Greenland should never be independent. It shouldn't even be an option. Also, I'm a little upset that neither one of them is said things in accord with the Fun Friday ethos of Fault Line. So the burden has fallen to me. And so let me make some key points
Ratchet here. It up, Les.
Greenland is not really Greenland. It's Vinland, which is what my ancestors called it when they went there in the year 1000. Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red. That's what it should properly be called. So we need to change the name. Denmark, while an ally and seemingly a nice group of people, has a long history of oppressing my people, the Norwegians, going way back. So if we're going to honor history, let's not forget that part. The Danes are not innocent here, and we shouldn't kid ourselves. And so I think, like, going forward, we all need to have maybe a slightly different approach here. Yes, this administration is unorthodox in the way it does things. That's fine. That seems to be a feature, not a bug. May even be why President Trump got elected, is because people were kind of tired of the old way of doing things. It's a little provocative. There's going to be some consequences for that. We'll deal with them. And Secretary Rubio, I think, is kind of taking a lot of this burden on his own shoulders and going to Denmark to talk to them. That should be a very interesting experience. But I think at the end of the day, let's remember Greenland is in the Western Hemisphere. The Donroe Doctrine is a real thing now. The idea that a European country controls part of something in North America is bananas. It makes more sense for Quebec to be independent than for Denmark to own something in our hemisphere. So we all need to show a little bit more flexibility going forward. That's my hot take, Jones.
Matthew.
So all the French Martinique should belong to the U.S. as well. So anything owned by a European country in the Western Hemisphere falls to Donroe Doctrine and
Martinique. The entire Caribbean, like all of the Caribbean.
The Caribbean's
basically.
next.
Yeah, Caribbean.
That's some good real estate.
We basically own the Caribbean anyway. I mean, like, who are we kidding? Do the flags really matter down there? Come on.
Okay.
Matthew's thinking about his real estate and investments into the future. He's like, oh, what do I need to get ahead of right now following the Donroe Doctrine?
You're really undermining the value of my array of passports for those countries.
Vinland.
Okay, we heard it here first.
You want a Vinland passport.
I was going to say, everyone keep your eyes out for Vinland of the future. Thanks so much. Les, thank you for making it a fun Friday and showing us what's really important as we wrap up our first week of the new year. That's a wrap. Thanks so much to Kelly Crawley, Claude Jennings, and the entire NSI team and their help in producing today's episode. We're back on Monday, January 12th for another episode of Fault Lines, NSI's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. We're on YouTube. Check out Matthew's office there. And if you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.